Please comment where you are watching in the world. Please become a channel member to support us, and share your dating horror stories to us via our subreddit in the description. Now let's dive in. This didn't happen during the date, but after our one and only date. This happened almost 15 years ago. I was working abroad at the time, and I met an incredibly aesthetically pleasing lady at a coffee shop and absolutely had to chat her up. We exchanged numbers, and we went out for drinks later that week. While the date went off all right, I felt like something wasn't quite right, so I told her at the end of the night that I had a great time, but I didn't think we had much in common. She seemed okay with this fact, thanked me for my honesty, and we parted ways with a hug. A couple days later, I get a text as I'm leaving the office from her asking if I can meet up because she needed to talk to someone. I'm not going to be jerk and say no, especially since she sounded desperate, so I told her to meet me at the coffee shop where we first met. She showed up with a suitcase, looking incredibly disheveled and obviously having recently cried. We sat down to start talking, and she started telling me how she was in a bad place, got involved with a lot of hard drugs, was turning tricks on the street to fund said drugs, and just got kicked out by her mom. While I'm trying to absorb the deluge and not choke on my coffee, she asked if she could stay with me. Nope. I told her I wasn't comfortable with the idea since we didn't know each other, and asked if she had anyone else to turn to, which led to more crying. We were starting to cause a scene, so I then offered to get a room for her at one of the local hotels, using my travel points, but she didn't have to know, so that she could at least have a place for the night while she sorted things out. She accepted on the condition that I at least stay a while with her for comfort. We check in, head to the room, and sit down to start talking some more. I then realize that it's relatively late, and I have to get up early for work, so I make these facts known. She breaks down some more, which leaves me conflicted to the point that I reluctantly stay, and I tell myself that I have a pretty good excuse for my boss in the morning. A few more hours later, I really need to get to sleep, so I tell her that I'm just going to sleep in the one bed, so I can get some rest before my day starts, and she can have the other bed to herself. She goes to start getting ready for bed, and I fall fast asleep. I wake up roughly 30 minutes later, probably around 4 a.m.-ish, incredibly groggy, but something is definitely not right. I'm still trying to focus because I slept in my contacts, so my eyes are taking a minute to adjust. There's an arm draped around me. Why do I feel wet and sticky? Then I notice all the red. She cut herself and crawled into bed with me. Instant panic mode. It took everything I had to swallow my heart a couple times as it desperately attempted to escape. I called down to the front desk asking where the nearest hospital was. No time to explain. I'll pay for the room, etc. I don't remember carrying her out to the car, wrapped in the drenched bedsheets, nor do I remember the drive to the hospital. I only remember carrying her through the front door and yelling for help. The staff rushed over and took her away, and I was immediately sat with 2 officers and a nurse doctor, who started asking me a lot of questions. I answered as honestly as I could, but noticed my peripheral was starting to turn black, then fainted. I eventually came to, and so did the girl. Thankfully, she corroborated my side of the story, and that there was no foul play. I don't want to know what would have happened otherwise considering I was a foreign national on a work visa. I've avoided talking to girls in coffee shops since. I later found out she was a self-inflictor and had cuts up and down her thighs as well as her arms. She had taken some sleeping pills and started cutting herself. Then the pills took effect, and she just laid down next to me. She didn't slit her wrists, but that's not something I was looking for at the time while desperately trying to figure out if she was breathing. She was, of course. Given her comatose state from the pills, I thought the worst when I couldn't get her conscious. My story is like something out of a true crime podcast, but unfortunately, it was real life, and I was the one who had to figure out how to escape before my life was in danger. I met this boy, Adam, on Bumble. Handsome man, polite, chatty, the usual. The biggest plus for me was his love for dogs. That is a huge win in my eyes. After a week or so of texting, sending each other pics of our beloved furry friends, he asked if I wanted to grab some drinks. I wasn't getting any weird vibes, so I agreed. The date started like any other. We met at a fairly busy bar not far from my place. Adam was good-looking, well-dressed, and friendly. He asked me lots of questions about myself, what I studied at university, where I was from, whether I liked to travel, and of course where my love for dogs originated from. He seemed genuinely interested in me, and I remember thinking, wow, this guy's actually nice, unlike my previous partners and dates. But looking back, there were little things that felt off, like how he kept steering the conversation back to my family, asking if I was close to them, whether they lived nearby, if I had anyone I relied on. At the time, I thought he was just being curious, but now it makes my stomach turn. After a couple of drinks, he suggested we head back to his place to keep the night going. I hesitated for a second. I'd only just met him, after all. Booty didn't want to seem paranoid. Plus, he lived close by, and I figured I could leave any time if things got weird. So I agreed. When we got to his place, it was a bit messier than I expected. Not like serial killer lair messy, but enough to make me question how much effort he really put into having people over. There were empty takeout containers on the counter, random clothes tossed on a chair, and the whole place smelled faintly of stale beer. That's when I started to feel a little uneasy. Not terrified, just off. Adam, however, seemed perfectly at ease. He offered me a drink, but I declined, saying I'd already had enough. He laughed it off, saying, "You don't trust me?" in this joking but not really tone. I laughed awkwardly and changed the subject, but the vibe was definitely shifting. I told him I needed to use the bathroom, and he pointed me down the hall. As I walked through his apartment, I noticed more odd details. The locks on the inside of the front door were strange. Heavy duty, like something you'd see on a warehouse, not a flat. There were no pictures on the walls, no signs of a life lived in this space, just stacks of random junk and a few pieces of mismatched furniture. I stepped into the bathroom and locked the door behind me, taking a moment to just breathe. Something about this whole situation felt wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I splashed some water on my face, trying to shake the uneasy feeling, and that's when I noticed the window. It was small, just above the toilet, and it looked out onto the street. As I glanced out, something caught my eye, a van pulling up in front of the building. It was black, no windows in the back, the kind of vehicle you see in crime dramas when someone's about to get kidnapped. Two men got out, both wearing dark clothes, and they walked around to the back of the van, opening the doors. My stomach dropped. I don't know why, but something about the way they moved, the way they looked around like they were checking to see if anyone was watching, it set off every alarm bell in my head. I froze, watching as they pulled out what looked like restraints. Rope? I couldn't tell exactly, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. I immediately thought, I need to get out of here. Now. Right F now. I unlocked the bathroom door and quietly made my way back toward the main room. Adam was standing by the window, looking out at the street. When he saw me, he jumped a little, like he wasn't expecting me to come back so soon. "You okay?" he asked, his voice overly casual. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my own voice steady. "Actually, I think I should head home. It's getting late." His expression changed, just for a second, but long enough for me to notice. It was like he wasn't expecting me to leave. "Oh, come on," he said, forcing a smile. "The night's just getting started." "No, really," I said, grabbing my jacket. "I've got an early morning." He stepped in front of me, blocking the door. "Why are you in such a rush?" he asked, his tone sharper now. "You're not scared of me, are you?" My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Of course not," I said, laughing nervously. "I just really need to get home. Maybe we can hang out again later this week." He stared at me for a moment, like he was trying to decide whether to let me go. Finally, he stepped aside. "All right," he said, his voice cold. "Let me walk you out." "No need," I said quickly. "I'll be fine." And then I bolted. I didn't stop running until I was halfway down the block. I glanced back just in time to see Adam standing in the doorway, watching me with this furious look on his face. The van was still parked out front, and the two men were now leaning against it, talking quietly. I didn't stick around to find out what they were planning. When I got home, I locked every door and window and called my best friend, telling her everything. She begged me to report it to the police, but I didn't know what to say. "Hi, I think my date might be a human trafficker." It sounded insane, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The weird questions about my family, the strange locks, the black van. I don't know for sure what would have happened if I'd stayed, but I'm not interested in finding out. So a long while back when I was in Tokyo, I met a Japanese woman about 10 years older than me. I was in my early 20s, she her mid-30s, although she could have been older because she adamantly refused to tell me her age. She said that she wanted me to take her on a date, and I agreed. I asked what she wanted to do, and she said she wanted to have some sushi. I reserved a nice little sushi restaurant recommended by a colleague well in advance, and finally the day came. I picked her up, complimented her outfit, and we took off. While I was driving over, I told her where we were going, and she immediately said, "No, I want to go to Sushiro." Sushiro is a conveyor belt sushi type of place where the sushi goes around the restaurant on this little belt, and you pick what you want from it. It's more of a family joint type of place. When I said I had reservations at another place, she said it was fine, and we should just go to Sushiro. When I tried to call the restaurant I reserved, she snapped and told me not to. So we're sitting in the lobby of Sushiro. We have no reservation, so obviously the wait time on a Saturday night is quite long. There are kids running around shrieking, everyone shouting over each other. I feel my phone vibrating in my pocket as the restaurant I reserved calls me, but don't dare answer it. During this whole time my date is dead silent. Any attempt on my part at a conversation is met with a one-word answer that invites no further discussion. We finally get to our table and sit down. For a bit of a change of mood, I say, "Phew, that was a wait." She informs me I should have taken a reservation. Okay. Then she immediately asks me if I'd ever have sex with another man. Wait, what the fuck? I think it's some bizarre joke of a question, and say no, I wouldn't. Then she asks why not. I say I don't like men. She asks how I would know that if I'd never tried it. I get sucked into this conversation, and I have never heard someone so fiercely debate a point that I would enjoy having sex with another man. Finally, she has her fill of sushi, although her appetite for asking if I'd ever have sex with another man is clearly voracious. At that time, I get an emergency call from a friend, where I answer the phone and talk to my friend. I tell her I have to go, pay for the food, and leave her at the restaurant without a way to get home. I mean, it was Tokyo, so obviously there was probably a train or subway within 50 feet, but yeah, absolutely the most insane person I have ever met, absolutely the worst date I have ever had. Dates are meant to be enjoyable and fun, right? No, not for me. I have had 17 dates in the last few months, and yeah, there have been good and bad ones, but this one was by far my worst. My name's Emily, I'm a second-year uni student, and this is the story of how I ended up trapped in an escape room with the most competitive, unhinged guy I've ever met in my life. It all started on Hinge, and started talking to a guy called Dan. I recognized him from one of my classes previously, and that helped to break the ice. Rather than the usual coffee date to start, he suggested an escape room. At first, I thought, okay, that's kind of fun and different. I mean, I'd never done an escape room before, but I'd heard they were a laugh. Plus, it felt like a low-pressure way to break the ice meeting up face to fact. The night of the date, he turned up and was cute, taller than me, important, and he had this easygoing smile I fell in love with. The usual awkward first date pleasantries lingered, but disappeared quickly. The theme of the escape room was a bank heist, which sounded cool. We were supposed to break into the vault and solve a bunch of puzzles to steal the cash before the cops arrived. The guy at the front desk gave us a quick rundown, handed us a clipboard, and wished us luck. Little did I know, I was about to be locked in a room with someone who took the phrase "teamwork makes the dream work" and set it on fire. The moment the timer started, Dan went from charming to, well, let's just say intense. The first puzzle was this simple lockbox with a combination, and I was trying to piece together the code when Dan swooped in and snatched it out of my hands. "Here, let me do it," he said, not even looking at me. "I'm really good at these." Okay, I said, stepping back and trying not to feel completely useless. He fiddled with the lock for about 5 seconds before barking, "Check the table. There's got to be something else we're missing." I blinked at him, a bit taken aback, but I didn't want to seem like I wasn't pulling my weight, so I started rummaging through the fake bank documents on the desk. "Not there," he snapped, like I was some kind of idiot. "Look under it. Under it." It was around this point that I started to realize this wasn't going to be the fun, light-hearted bonding experience I'd imagined. Dan was pacing around the room like a man possessed, muttering under his breath about how we were wasting time. Every time I tried to contribute, he either ignored me or shot down my ideas. At one point, I found a key hidden inside a fake plant, and instead of saying, "Good find" or "Nice job," he said, "Took you long enough." I just stood there holding the key, wondering if I could use it to unlock the door and escape his attitude. It didn't stop there. The more puzzles we faced, the more unhinged he became. He was barking orders at me like we were on some kind of reality TV competition, and the prize was £1,000,000. "Read the clue again." "No, not like that, slower." "God, this is so easy. How are we not getting this?" By the time we hit the halfway mark, I was actively avoiding eye contact with him and debating whether I should fake a stomach ache to get out of there. But the real low point came when we got stuck on this riddle involving a series of numbers. Dan was standing in the middle of the room, gripping his hair like he was about to rip it out. "This doesn't even make sense," he shouted, slamming his hands on the table. I looked up at the camera in the corner of the room, the one the game master watches, and silently prayed for them to intervene. And they did. The voice of the game master crackled over the intercom. "Would you like a hint?" "Yes, please," I said immediately. "No," Dan practically shouted, glaring up at the speaker like it had personally insulted him. "We don't need help." At that moment, I wanted to disappear, or at least crawl under the nearest table and wait for the timer to run out. We eventually escaped with about 2 minutes to spare, but it didn't feel like a victory. Dan, however, acted like we'd just won the World Cup. "See? I told you we'd crush it," he said, grinning like he'd single-handedly solved every puzzle. "Yeah," I mumbled, already planning my excuse to leave. As we walked out of the building, he turned to me and said, "That was fun, right? We make a great team." A great team? I spent the entire hour feeling like an unpaid intern on a project I didn't sign up for. When he asked if I wanted to grab a drink afterward, I told him I had an early lecture the next morning, a blatant lie, and made my escape. As soon as I got home, I texted my flatmate, Liv, and told her the whole story. She was laughing so hard she nearly fell off her bed, which, honestly, fair. I blocked Dan on Hinge that night. Was working as a chef at a really nice building that fed 3K people daily for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. One of the bakers was a few years older than me and super funny, cute, and talented. We didn't talk much since I worked opposite shifts than her most of the time. Well, one day we have a big function, and she is paired up with me to work, cool. Flirting became making out in the walk-in. She asks me to take her to the beach after work. Yes. Except I've been working 7 days straight, 12 to 14 hours days. I'm in good shape, but realistically, I'm tired, boss. She waits for me at the end of the shift. We hit my truck and go out to the beach, sex in the bed of the truck. I had left my go bag, which had a blanket and pillow, at home apparently, so we had to use our day-old crusty clothes for comfort. Somehow managed to make it happen. I am amazed at how beautiful this girl is, totally on cloud 9, such a great feeling. Are you sleeping? Huh, what? This isn't a dream? Oh fuck. Mood change in 2 seconds. I apologize and explain it's been a long week. She says, yeah, it has. Time to go. Could hear a pin drop on the way back, it was so silent. I drop her off at her car, check my phone and see a text that I need to come in early for work. Look up and see the sun is just starting to rise. F. Put my now day old. Just had almost really great sex on top of them clothes back on, and catch 45-minute sleep before dragging ass into work. F. Thank God I was a kid, 15-ish, but I met a girl at an away game for my high school's basketball team. Got her number, spoke for a couple weeks, then planned to come over for dinner with her family. At the time, when my body could handle it, I used to pride myself on eating the spiciest buffalo wings I could find. Well, girl flexed how her dad makes the spiciest wings ever. I boldly called her bluff, so she had her dad make wings that night and made his special batch on the side for me. Well, I ate every drop, despite dying inside and dripping gallons of sweat. It wasn't maybe 40 minutes after eating that those motherfuckers shredded their way through me and had to come out the other side to say hello. So I went to the bathroom and proceeded to crap out half of my body weight. Flushed. And the fucking toilet fucking overflooded with my fucking poop. I literally sat on the sink countertop and watched my brown sludge as it approached and went over the top, all over the bathroom floor. I wanted to just sneak out and find a neighbor I could call my mom from to pick me up, but it was one of those bathrooms under the staircase, and the family/living room was a direct shot from the bathroom. So the second I would step out, I'd be facing them sitting on the couch. Decided to bite the bullet, cracked the door open, and quietly summoned the girl over. Maybe she'll be understanding, I thought. Nope. The second she could see the floor, she screamed for her mom. Mom came over. The second she could see the floor, she screamed for her husband. The second the husband came over, he screams F-U-C-K. The girl ran upstairs and left me alone with the parents, and I had to watch, mortified, as the mom begrudgingly cleaned my floor-spanning poop. She was sure to make crystal clear, as she hauled the poo-dripping bathroom rug, how expensive it was. I offered to help, but anything I said or asked was cut off with a stern, curt no. My mom finally pulled up, and I jetted out of the door. I couldn't even tell my mom what happened. I was so humiliated. And sharing with my best friends became a mistake, because they constantly held telling people about my mishap above my head to get me to do what they wanted. Finally, I learned to say fuck it, embrace my embarrassment, and release myself of their blackmail chains by recording a rap song and releasing it to the wild. I had never spoken or seen the girl again. So a long while back when I was in Tokyo, I met a Japanese woman about 10 years older than me. I was in my early 20s, she her mid-30s, although she could have been older because she adamantly refused to tell me her age. She said that she wanted me to take her on a date, and I agreed. I asked what she wanted to do, and she said she wanted to have some sushi. I reserved a nice little sushi restaurant recommended by a colleague well in advance, and finally the day came. I picked her up, complimented her outfit, and we took off. While I was driving over, I told her where we were going, and she immediately said, "No, I want to go to Sushiro." Sushiro is a conveyor belt sushi type of place where the sushi goes around the restaurant on this little belt, and you pick what you want from it. It's more of a family joint type of place. When I said I had reservations at another place, she said it was fine, and we should just go to Sushiro. When I tried to call the restaurant I reserved, she snapped, and told me not to. So we're sitting in the lobby of Sushiro. We have no reservation, so obviously the wait time on a Saturday night is quite long. There are kids running around shrieking, everyone shouting over each other. I feel my phone vibrating in my pocket as the restaurant I reserved calls me, but don't dare answer it. During this whole time my date is dead silent. Any attempt on my part at a conversation is met with a one-word answer that invites no further discussion. We finally get to our table and sit down. For a bit of a change of mood, I say, "Phew, that was a wait." She informs me I should have taken a reservation. Okay. Then she immediately asks me if I'd ever have sex with another man. Wait, what the fuck? I think it's some bizarre joke of a question, and say no, I wouldn't. Then she asks why not. I say I don't like men. She asks how I would know that if I'd never tried it. I get sucked into this conversation, and I have never heard someone so fiercely debate a point, that I would enjoy having sex with another man. Finally, she has her fill of sushi, although her appetite for asking if I'd ever have sex with another man is clearly voracious. At that time I get an emergency call from a friend, where I answer the phone and talk to my friend. I tell her I have to go, pay for the food, and leave her at the restaurant without a way to get home. I mean, it was Tokyo, so obviously there was probably a train or subway within 50 feet, but yeah, absolutely the most insane person I have ever met, absolutely the worst date I have ever had. Get set up by my friend's fiancé with a new coworker. We were introduced at a party, then decided to go out for some drinks, etc. She is educated, intelligent, fun, gorgeous, well-dressed, but can't find a good guy, according to all sources. We head out to this great little place, now closed sadly. First 2 hours, we are having an amazing time. We kiss, it's electric. I like her, and she really likes me. We decide to order another couple of drinks and some food. We are having a good time together, already set up another date. I decide that I want to see where this will go, so I'm not going to let this first date wind up in bed. I want to see her again, she's great. Then it starts. I can't tell if it's the booze or she's just been well behaved up until then. Our server doesn't come back with our order quickly, and that bitch better hurry with my drink. Did she get lost or something? She laughs, then quietly mutters, "Fucking kike." I'm not sure what she says at first. Note, the friend that set us up's husband, my best friend, is Jewish. Then as our order comes, the floodgates appear to open, and more gradually her mouth spews bile, racist and other, every few sentences directed randomly at people she sees nearby or comments in general. WTF happened to the gorgeous, intelligent girl I met here 3 hours ago? I'm not drunk, a bit tipsy but still in control. She's intoxicated, so I decide that I've had enough, and it's getting worse, so we have to go. We chose a place close to where she lives, so it would be in walking distance, and I decide it's not safe for her to walk alone, and I'll grab a cab afterward. The walk was brutal. I've got a super horny Jekyll and hide on my arm, trying to get her home ASAP, so I can GTFO. She's loud as shit now. She practically yelling about the fact that she wants me to do XYZ to her when we get home, and she's gonna break my dick off and ruin me for other women. She bellows at anyone looking at her strangely because they are a/in, insert horrible phrase here. She gets closer to me and tells me how great I am, and she wants to see me again tomorrow, not the weekend when we originally planned. totally oblivious that I'm certain this will be our last date. Get her to the door of her building after a brutally long walk. Should have been 10 minutes, took almost an hour because she was a total mess. A scene ensues at her door when I won't come in. I tell her my ride pulled up out front already. I've got to work early, and we have had too much to drink for this. Don't you like me? Don't you want to fuck this? She flashes her amazing breasts at me and pulls up her dress. I get to see the full show. You don't know what you're missing? You can't get it up, can you? Are you fucking gay, you fucking faggot? Don't call me you piece of shit. I'm telling everyone you have a small dick, you faggot. This takes less than 2 minutes. I say goodnight, and I escape quickly down the stairs. She texts me saying, FCK, oh you ashall you are regret sigh, or some other bad drunk typing pre-autocorrect. I escape home. The next 2 days are interesting, trying to explain to my friends what went wrong while receiving texts and ducking calls that left voicemails all indicating. Had a great time. Sorry if I misbehaved a little on the way home. Wish you'd stayed over. Can we see each other sooner rather than later? Don't you like me anymore, etc. 2 stories. I have more, but these were the 2 most extreme. The first girl I met for pizza at a relatively fancy local pizza place. It seemed to be going really well, and she was super cute. I was into it in a big way. We're walking back to the car, and she said, I hope you're not going to try to kiss me, because I'm just here for the free meal. I just laughed it off, gave her a hug, and left. Somewhere between 1.5 years and 2 years later, I hit her up on OkCupid again. She didn't remember me, which was perfect, so I set up another date at the same pizza place. It went poorly. Like many of the other stories, she was mostly ignoring me, sometimes to the point of not answering direct questions. I guess she figured that she didn't have to fake interest to get her free meal. I ate my share of food, said, I have to go to the bathroom, and walked right out the door. We were sitting next to the door. She gave me a disgusted look, but I kept walking. She never tried to contact me after that. I assume she figured out what the deal was. For the second girl, it's considerably more mundane, and technically I didn't walk out, but it's probably a bit more amusing. We met at a pub for some food / she wanted to get a drink. I don't drink. She showed up and looked nothing like her picture, and I was immediately not interested romantically, but I figured, hey, I can afford the meal, so we'll sit, have some food and good conversation, and I'll tell her how I feel after I buy the meal to hopefully take the sting off a bit. Well, something was very wrong once we sat down. Her hands were shaking visibly, and quite noticeably to start. Secondly, the conversation was bizarre. I was telling her how I was a developer, and she said, yeah, I know a bit about that myself. I have an Ubuntu at home. This statement confused me a bit, but I figured maybe she meant a computer with Ubuntu installed, so I just shook it off. She proceeded to tell me how she was 1 number away from figuring out the Google algorithm. Now, these things might sound relatively normal to you if you're not a developer, but to put it in perspective, it's something like saying, I'm 1 letter away from figuring out the Scrabble rules. It just doesn't make any sense. To top all of that off, she was falling asleep. Like a lot. She'd fall asleep in the middle of a sentence, and then just wake up as if she didn't know it happened and would just finish her sentence. I pointed this out to her, and she said, yeah, I'm just tired. I'm figuring opiates were far more likely, so at this point I said, you know what, you should leave. You're clearly very tired, and if you stick around it is not going to be safe for you to drive home. She said it was okay, and I said no, I insist. You should leave. Now. So she left, and the server arrived with our appetizer a few minutes later. He asked where she went, and I gave him a shorter version of the story and told him not to worry. I'm going to finish this appetizer and have a bit to eat. My meal alone was far more pleasant. I hate online dating so much. She playfully flirted, no, suck your own D, 2 feet in front of me on our first date. The problem? She was on the phone with a co-worker in a hushed tone. So the backstory, we were also co-workers and had been talking and flirting for a while. She actually insisted we finally go on a date. I'm ecstatic, to be honest. We meet in front of a coffee shop and just talk for a little while. I remember thinking she didn't seem interested in being there, which was weird because she wanted to do this. I remember at one point she got a call from a co-worker who was covering her shift or something like that. She was very polite and even asked if it was okay to take the call, which of course it was. She had gotten off of work to come out, I think, and or worked a little later in the day. I'm trying to not listen, but a phrase instantly caught my attention. No, you suck your own dick. And just in case I didn't hear it the first time, she repeated it a few more times. Sadly, the words themselves weren't even the worst part, it's how she said it. Imagine if the person on the phone was Brad Pitt, insert any famously attractive person, and I was a shit-coated beggar. That is how I interpreted the difference in tones she had with the person on the phone and me. The worst part? I didn't leave then. Maybe 10 or so minutes later, we were walking to an Italian ice place, and I told her I heard her on the phone and was not okay with it. Her initial response was complete shock that I had heard. Of course I did, you were 2 feet in front of me, and then she denied it. Either right after or not too long later, I said again I was not cool with it. I think at that point she just pretended it never happened. Worse still, I stayed even longer. But I was defeated at this point. The moment I left was after she asked, "Are you seeing anyone?" Which I was left literally unable to answer. After what felt like an absolute eternity, I think I muttered out no. I mean, we are on a date. A date you wanted, you asked for. You literally called it a date. She went on to say she wasn't either. After that, my brain shut down for 10 to 20 seconds until I made my decision. She had mentioned earlier she only had 1.5 hours and she needed to go back to work. I remember this and had my out. I told her I was going to go. She seemed very surprised and asked why. I lied and said she had to go back to work soon, and I didn't want to keep her. I talked to her via text a couple days later. She said she asked me if I was seeing someone was meant to get me to open up. She still completely ignored what happened on the phone call. She called me 1 to 2 times in the week after I think. She had done that many times before the date when she would get off of work. I ignored then. She even came back to my pharmacy a few months later. She seemed like she was testing the grounds to see how I felt about her. Obviously, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with her. At that point, I honestly regretted knowing her. That happened 4 years ago, was the first date I had been on in years. I haven't been on a date since. Honestly, at this point, I'm afraid of what the universe will do next. Hold my dark matter and watch this shit. I'm a woman. Went on a date with a guy from a dating app many years ago for brunch on a weekend. We were both in our very early 20s. The only thing I requested in my profile was no one who smoked. The smell makes me nauseated, even if it's on clothes. And no one with kids, because I am not interested in that baggage life for myself. Sorry. It was clearly indicated in my profile. No smokers. No kids. That's it. Everything else goes. Guy shows up. Looks like profile, good sign. And we sit down to order plenty of pancakes and omelets. Have a great 2-hour brunch with plenty of getting along and laughing. I pay for all of it because I don't like owing anyone or feeling like the guy should pay all the time. I do this with most dates because I can afford to. Then he tells me that he knew I wouldn't go on a date with him if he had told me the truth about himself up front. I get scared. What truth? My mind goes to many places. He said he had to meet me in person and have a date so that I would see how great he is and compatible we are with each other before he told me what would otherwise have driven me away. I'm like, okay, what is it? Him. I have a wife and kid. We're getting a divorce though, so it's fine. Oh, and I also live 2 hours from your town to raise my toddler when I have shared custody of him. Me. Okay. Thanks for telling me. It's no big deal. I understand why you wouldn't want to tell me through messaging. He just wasted 3 hours of my weekend and $60. I was furious. I would not date a liar, and I hate having my time wasted. I also am not interested in someone who is married or is getting a divorce. If someone said they didn't like skinny people in their profile, I wouldn't convince them to go on a date with me and surprise them with my low BMI to prove to them how great my other qualities are. I decided I would see how far I could take this date to show him how lying isn't acceptable. Me. I don't want this date to end, but I have a spa appointment in 30 minutes across town. Want to join me? They have free wine and tequila there. He says yes, and we make our way over to my favorite cheap-ass Asian crotch waxing salon, where they don't give a fuck if they make you bleed, but a Brazilian only costs $30 plus tip. No one speaks English that well, and it's not clean. I asked him if he ever got his downstairs waxed. He says no. I asked him if he wanted to. I said it doesn't really hurt. It actually hurts way worse the first time. I told him he should get the Brazilian with me at the same time since the rooms are connected. I made it sound like it could be adventurous and a little sexy. I told him I would hold his hand while it happened. I said it felt no worse than pulling off a Band-Aid. OMG, what a big lie. I totally pressured him into it. I could tell he was calculating the likelihood of a second date if he didn't do it. He agreed to the Brazilian. That's a full wax of your belly button to dick shaft, balls, and butthole. All of it. Everything gone. We went back to the wax room where there were 2 beds. They drew the curtain between the 2 beds and told him to get naked from the waist down and lay in diaper change position on the table. That's when you hold your legs like a baby with your jennies on full display. My wax lady came into the other half and started doing my wax. His hand came out from under the curtain and found mine. I held his hand and laughed under my sweater as he yelped with every pull. The manager had to keep coming into his side of the wax and telling him to stop yelling as it was scaring other people at the spa. I was laughing. His wax lady was laughing. The manager was laughing outside the door. He got through it after a very long 25 minutes. I walked out and never returned any of his messages. I lied about how much it would hurt. I left him with the bill for his balls. We were even. I sent this to Bad Dates of Melbourne on Facebook, but I'll copy and paste it here as they couldn't share. They thought it was drug-related. Most likely was. I had been meaning to meet this Tinder date for several weeks, but things would always crop up, as luck would have it. She was a pretty attractive girl whose personality seemed to match my dry and sarcastic humor. The first 2 occasions as I was unable to attend, and then on 2 occasions she used her bail cards too. There was no animosity with either of us. We agreed to meet for the 5th attempt and joked about the date likely being the worst Tinder date of all time, and that if the date indeed sucked, it would make for a good dinner-time story with friends. Well, I got more than I bargained for. We opted to meet outside Naked for Satan, a bar, as a starting point. She mentioned she would be at after work drinks, and then would meet me at 8.30. So it's 8.30, and I am outside Naked for Satan. In the space of 15 minutes, I had 11 missed calls and various other calls from her that made little to no sense. Every call would be answered and she would say, "Where are you?" "I'm in an Uber and I don't know where to go." She sounded delusional on the phone, and there were moments where it sounded like she was talking in tongue. She was. I get another call and answer. This time she says, "I'm out of the Uber, but I'm somewhere I don't know." I am beginning to think I am being catfished. I sent her my location and she sent me hers, but her GPS was not appearing on my phone. She calls again, and I reply with, "Hey, not really wanting to waste my time with this. It's been 45 minutes. I have told you where I am. You have asked me where I am every phone call since. Not sure how clear I can be," to which I hear her scream through the phone, "F." Well, that ambient noise could be heard at the not-too-distant future, because I could see her a few streets up standing by the curb. I go over to her, and she is somewhat cooked. I don't know what she was on, but if I had a guess it was probably meth. She went from super colorful in personality to absolutely dark and negative. This went back and forth within minutes. I am walking back towards Naked for Satan, and decide that maybe I should go to a bar that I won't mind never going back to, as I had already was beginning to plan my exit. We get to the order, and I order 2 drinks. She was back to being level again. I ask her about her writing, as she said she did music journalism, to which she took off her jacket, pushed her cleavage in my face, and started talking in tongues again. Without even taking a sip of my drink, I told him, "I'm a weird fucker, but you're too fucking weird for me," and bounced out of there. I sent her a text shortly after saying that, "I'm not sure what was with you tonight, but you are a mess and your aggression etc. was unwarranted. Hope you're okay. Get home safe." The next morning I went to check up on her, but she had blocked me on everything. So I matched with this girl on Tinder. We chatted for a bit, then it headed on over to Snapchat. I mean, she was gorgeous. She matched with her Tinder profile pics, so that was great. She sends out a snap story saying she's bored, who wants to hang out. I just got off work, and I threw out a message, "Sure, let's hang out." She says okay, so I tell her I'll shower and head into town. All was good. When I was ready I snapped her and said, "What's your address?" She calls me immediately and is freaking out 'cause I'm from Tinder, and to tell her I'm not some murderer. So I calmed her down and she gave me her addy. I was on Z-way. I arrive at this girl's house, obviously a low-income housing situation. Whatever, I picked my ex up from a women's shelter while she brought her 9-month-old with. So I'm a bit of a red flag collector. I've been in worse situations, right? So I knock on the door. She opens the door and says, "Come in, I'm almost ready." So I walk into the worst possible house I've ever seen. Clothes everywhere. There was not a clean spot to be seen anywhere. Yeesh. Whatever she's a dime, I'll do a lot to let this happen. So she comes down the stairs sniffling a lot. She says she's allergic to her perfume. All G. So we hop in my whip. I say, have you eaten? She says no, so we decide to go to a local joint for some food. We arrive on scene, we sit down and she asks if it's okay that I'm paying, and if she orders a drink or two. So that's cool, whatever, sure. So she orders a double drink, then another. So we get the food, eat up and decide to hit the road, Jack. I said, do you want to go for a walk? She agrees. She asks to hit a liquor store on the way, so I'm like, sure. We head in and she asks if I'll foot the bill. I said, sure. She grabs 2 full-ass bottles of wine. I said, like, I know I'm ugly, but I'm not 4 shots plus 2 bottles of wine bad, am I? Anyways, we leave with the wine. We also stop at the 7-Eleven, and I purchase smokes for her. We get down a walking path beside a creek and sit on some rocks to watch the creek. She says, I forgot my smokes in your whip. May you go get them. Sure, I say. I run back to grab them. That as I get back, she's gone. Vanished. I'm like, oh shit, okay. Then I see her squatting in a bush, pissing. She yells, don't look at me. So I look away and go back to sitting. She decides to call her dad on the tele and gets me to talk to him. Turns out he works with a guy I work with. Super F. So we get off the phone and sit beside each other. As we chillin', she's creeping closer, and so am I. So we are shoulder to shoulder, her leg on mine. So we chillin', then I feel this like something on my leg. I'm like, WTF, I look down. This chick's pissing right beside me and on me. So she apologizes and says, let's go back to my place. So off to her home we go, hit the bed, throw on Step Brothers, and we going at it in her bed. She says, let's get naked, and like, finally. So she says to give her a hug. She just wants to be held, naked. She starts crying. I'm like, oh boy. She then says, I don't deserve this, and we get back to kissing, and then she starts going down on me. She's starting to give me head, and I'm starting to get to full mast. She stops, grabs her phone, calls someone random, then asks me to take her to a local hotel. I agree, and I'm standing outside looking at my car being like, I should just run and get the F out. I decide to stay. She comes out wearing the skimpiest dress I ever did see. It's all hanging out. She hops in my ride, asks if I'll lend her $40. So sure, whatever. So we are driving to the bank. She's literally twerking her bare ass in my face as I'm driving. Then she takes my hand and shoves it in her dress, telling me to squeeze her chest super hard and shoving my fingers downstairs. So we get to the hotel. She breaks down, starts crying. I'm like, I need to get her out the car and get the F out. So we tried one side of the motel to find the room. There is a 3/4-ton truck with a flat deck trailer in the parking lot. She starts climbing over it, and her dress pops up, and all her lady bits are out. I'm like, F me. She comes back and says, wrong part of the motel. So she finally figures out where to go, and as she slips inside, I bail. I'm out. We are about 3 miles from her place, a chilly spring evening. She ain't got no shoes on, and this skimpy little dress. I'm driving home, and she calls me and asks where I went. I said I got called into work. She called me for 3 hours asking where I was. She was cold and had no way home. Met a girl online. Hit it off, agreed to meet. We lived on opposite ends of a major city. She was more familiar with the city than me and insisted on picking a restaurant that was halfway between us. She insisted on meeting at 6 p.m. on a weekday. I asked for a later time to avoid traffic, but she insisted. I left 3 hours early to get there on time. I realized about 2.5 hours early that I'd probably be 5 minutes late. Sent her a text and apologized. No response. Got to the restaurant. She seemed nice, told me she didn't drink alcohol, which was fine. I was a very social drinker and still am, and insisted that we couldn't order our own things. We had to split everything. Okay. Kinda weird, but I guess this means I get to try more things on the menu. Halfway through the date, mid-conversation, she tells me, so I hope you realize that at this point I expect you to fight for me. I have a puzzled look and ask, what? She tells me that, well, there were times I would initiate conversation or plans, and I won't do that anymore. As the man, I expect you to take the lead and initiate everything from here on out. I didn't really know what to say and changed the topic. Dessert came. She ordered some cookie thing, insisted that it had to be warmed up, even though they didn't serve it that way. Sent it back when it wasn't warm enough. They def fucked with it. I mean, I would've. Bill came, I paid, and we went to leave. I had a 2-hour drive back, so I was ready to get on my way home. She asks if I want to do anything else. By this point, it was like 9-ish on a weekday. I was admittedly a little pissed off by this whole waste of my time and said, what would you possibly expect to do? You don't drink, and most other activities are closed, plus I have a 2-hour drive home. You have to drive 2 hours back. She said, Yeah, don't you? You said this place was halfway. Oh no, she said, I live about 3 blocks that way. I walked here. The next day she texted me about how much fun she had and how she couldn't wait to do it again. 2 weeks ago, I met a guy on Tinder, Victor. In his profile photo, he had brown hair that was so dark, it almost looked black, styled in a sort of half-up, half-down style. His neck was tattooed with a spider web behind his ear, with a web trailing down to showcase a realistic spider biting his neck. He had other tattoos, but they all seemed to be abstract compared to this one, seemingly just done any old way. He wore red contacts, but it almost looked like he had red eyes with a hint of brown that resembled honey in the sunlight. As his pink lips held a lollipop stick in his mouth, he was taking a selfie in the mirror of a public bathroom. I was about to swipe right, but decided to check his bio to be sure he didn't list anything that could be considered a red flag. He was my age, 23. His bio simply stated, I hope you like vampires, because I'm a neck biter who doesn't mind the taste of blood. While all my friends found it cringy when I told them about it, I found it arousing. I have a thing for vampires, if you couldn't already guess. So this was a win for me. We got to messaging, and he expressed interest in hooking up. After some diligent planning, we agreed to start off going out to get to know each other. We wanted to take things slow, understanding boundaries and personalities before we began doing anything. Our first meetup was at the local Arby's where we talked over sandwiches and curly fries. We had an incredible time. We shared many of the same kinks, interests, and boundaries. It was as if the sex gods had sent this gorgeous man in my direction for a reason. The night after that, I had began experiencing difficulties sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, it was as though something had triggered my beagle, Riley. He would start panicking, barking and growling at my window. Every time I would go check, there would be nothing in sight. I figured perhaps the shadow of a nearby tree was upsetting him, so I put him in his crate for the night. I could hear his muffled barking downstairs for a few minutes, but soon it stopped. In the morning, I discovered something on my window when I went to open the blinds. There was a hand print, as if someone was attempting to break in. However, they seemed to be bloody. The blood seemed as though it was dripping from the middle and index finger, then dried there. I rushed outside in my pajamas in the freezing cold to see if perhaps something had just rusted, but when I looked, the hand print was no longer there. In disbelief, I went back inside and there wasn't anything. I chalked it up to nothing, assuming my half-asleep body was still adjusting to the morning light. I just went about my life until Victor and I had met up again. Something odd seemed to happen when we were talking, though. He asked me how the advertisement I was working on had come out. I work at a small bank as the graphic design department. I create all-out advertisements, signs for our 4 locations, and promotional photos for social media. I had been working on an advertisement over the last week, but I had never told him that. At least, I don't recall telling him about it. Regardless, I answered the question no matter how odd it seemed to be. Again, the night after our meetup, strange things happened. When I sent Riley to go potty that night, he wouldn't come in when I was calling him, which is very unlike him. He's very well trained and somewhat clingy at bedtime, so I walked into the yard to find him staring at the fence. This fence separates my yard with my next-door neighbor's yard. Riley was frozen in place, staring at a figure. This figure had on a hood, and I couldn't see his face because of the darkness. My neighbor's back porch light went out the other night, and they had yet to fix it, whereas mine doesn't really go far enough to see past this fence. The only thing I did see was 2 hands, their fingernails red like they were stained with blood. I screamed bloody murder, grabbing Riley and slamming the back door on the way back in. I locked all my doors and windows. After calling both police and my neighbors about the situation, everyone was getting my story. The police informed me that they could not do anything as I didn't see much and neither of us have cameras to prove anyone was there. They told me it was probably a childish prank from another neighbor's kid. I felt so crazy in that moment, thinking perhaps I have started hallucinating or that my eyes played tricks on me. That was, until the neighbor's wife let out her own scream of bloody murder that mixed with gut-wrenching sobs. We rushed over to their backyard, where the neighbor was hugging her now dead cat. I never knew they had a cat, but that's because he never had been let outside. The cat was covered in blood, said to be stabbed 7 times. I didn't sleep that night. I spent it sobbing, hugging Riley. It was clear the person had bad intentions, and I just narrowly escaped him while also saving my baby. I told no one in my life about this, because I do not want them thinking that I am crazy. I know there is proof that last night was real, I'm still questioning if maybe I was seeing things, and it was some sort of spiritual sign to save my dog, even if I could not save the neighbor's cat. Victor was like a rock to me, giving something to look forward to as the traumatic visuals of that figure haunted my everyday movements. We set up a date to hook up, wanting to try something with blood and needles. I was excited as I have never had anything of this. I always loved exploring new kinks and fetishes. At work, it was clear I wasn't well as my boss sent me home early. On my way home, I stopped by a gas station to fill up and get some snacks. While I was pumping gas into my car, I heard my phone buzz in my purse. I fished it out of there quickly, seeing a weird text from my neighbor. She told me there was a weird man trying to break into my house, but when the police came there was no sign of him. However, a very small portion of my lawn had been burnt by a cigarette left by the driveway. Now I was freaked out. Why is this happening to me? Who is targeting me? Does this mean everything from before was true, and I'm the one this man is after? When I asked for a description, it was the same hooded figure from before, but when the neighbor asked to know who he was, he smiled at her with a blistered face and pink teeth. She screamed, which alerted another neighbor to call the police. I now could not stay at my home, so with a friend, we headed to my house to gather my essentials, and I stayed with her for a couple days. I brought Riley along. Everything had seemed all right, nothing else had happened. However, the day I was meant to return home, a car followed me to work, driving away when I pulled into the parking lot. At first, I didn't question it as my friend has an apartment and assumed he was part of the complex, taking a similar route to work. Looking back, it had to be that guy. When I got back home, my living room was wrecked. Nothing was stolen, no signs of a break-in, just trashed. Now, I was utterly terrified to stay in this house, as someone clearly had something out for me. I was not going to take the risk of sleeping here and getting murdered in my sleep. I told Victor about everything, and he offered to let me have his spare room. I protested, insisting I can get a motel. He refused, promising he had a gun if he needed to defend me from anyone. I reluctantly agreed, but his house was very welcoming. The decor was a mix of gothic but modern, yet it had all seemed to homey. Riley seemed a little uneasy, however. I assumed it was the stress of the stalker and having to constantly move. We hooked up the next night. It was amazing. He pleased me in a way I had not ever dreamed of, soon becoming addicted to him. We did it a couple more times afterwards. Every time we did, he wore me out and I would need a nap or to rest from the night. So after some aftercare, Victor tucked me in and said he would wake me up in the morning when breakfast was prepared. At 3 a.m., I heard a scream. A dog's scream. My stomach dropped as I scrambled out of bed to rush downstairs, thinking Riley fell off something or got hurt somehow. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, there was a man. He had patches of hair on his head, red fingernails, blisters all over. He was leaning over Riley. I yelled for Victor, hoping he was in the bathroom. Only, the man turned to look at me, and I screamed. The man was Victor. The same blistered man at my house, the same red fingernails from my neighbor's yard, and those pink teeth. He looked like he wasn't ready for me to see him. Riley was on this carpet, bleeding. He had been drinking his blood, the knife still in his pocket. He reached for it when I ran back upstairs and barricaded myself in his bedroom, the only room with a lock. The lock was locked with furniture in front of the door for good measure. I noticed a blood stain on his carpet under a chair in this room. This wasn't my first time. Yes, he had a vial of my blood from our session, but I thought we had used it. I found 4 more in the closet when I emptied it. I knew I was in danger, especially as he pounded on the door, growling out my name. He soon resorted to stabbing the door, hoping I was behind it. I rushed to get dressed and grab my stuff as I heard him begging to be let in, saying he needs my blood to cure him. He needed my nutrients. He promised he would be good to me if I just supplied him with his medicine. I didn't listen, especially as he punched a hole through the door. I was out the window by the time he was peeking through the door, screaming my name. I had thrown my stuff before me, which somewhat cushioned my fall from the room. My ankle is fucked from the fall, but it didn't matter. I ran to my car and threw my stuff in the back as I saw the knife get stabbed through the front door. He ran after my car as I sped away. In the ER, I explained everything to the nurses and the police. I've been tested for STDs and STIs. I haven't gotten the results back yet. I gave the police my statement, in which they informed me Victor's house was abandoned. No one had lived there in 5 years, and his Tinder was gone too. I only had a photo of his neck and chest, nothing of his face. I don't think they're ever going to find him, if he even exists. I do not feel safe. I've quit my job, moved, dyed my hair. I've even gotten filler hoping it changed my appearance some. I'm a wreck without Riley, but the image of that man drinking his blood haunts me from ever wanting another beagle again. I'm in a motel right now, as I hop between them hoping I'll never be discovered. I'm running out of savings, which terrifies me. My mom has offered up my old room if I ever need to move back home, and has suggested counseling. I cannot leave the motels, I just can't. I don't know if I'll survive, which is why I write to the internet in the hopes that if he does find me, at least the world will know I am not crazy. That my story can be a cautionary tale. Not everyone is as they seem. They can ruin your life in an instant. You can run into Victor at any time, and I cannot let another soul be cursed with being tortured by him too. So please, be careful who you meet online. Especially Tinder. Met a woman online, coffee date, so she can scope me out. I dress nice. She's a grotesque blob that looked like her Olsen Mills glamour shots were taken a decade prior. But okay, I need to practice dating and socializing. So we agree to go on a date the following weekend. The whole week till is filled with texting. She's excited that I do laundry and dry cleaning. Wow. As before I make reservations and dress nice. The day and time arrives and she's not there. WTH. 10 minutes late she shows up in sweats. She claims she was ill, but didn't want to stand me up. I ask if she should be going out if she's sick. Oh no, it's not that kind of illness. She apologies for looking like a slob, and I remark that I'm not sure the restaurant will let us in. On the way to the restaurant, she starts to hint at her illness. She states that she's been getting this illness since high school, and it comes and goes, and she's got it under control with medication. Look, restaurant naturally turns us away, as she looks like Miss Piggy took a dump. So, I enact Plan B, and we head to another restaurant in the hip part of town. On the way there she confides that her illness makes eating spicy foods difficult. I ask if we shouldn't just call it a night. Oh no, she'll manage. We end up at a Vietnamese fusion joint. She orders some spicy shit and an alcoholic beverage. Eating causes her extreme visible pain. She's wincing all over. But she gets through the meal. We head back to my place, and she confides that her childhood illness produces sores that entirely coat her mouth and tongue. WTF. I ask to see. The absolute worst herpes outbreak I've ever seen until I became a nurse. I'm silent. Finally I explain that I don't think this I'd going to work. And oh, goodnight kiss. A week later she texts me that she's sorry it didn't work out yada yada. After this, 2 shitty experiences back to back in the same month, I decided eHarmony and their $75 per month expert matchmaking was absolute bullshit. I met a guy on Tinder. Seemed nice, fairly attractive. Seemed a little vanilla, actually. He didn't drink or smoke, wanted to be a meteorologist, was super close with his grandfather, gentlemanly and family-oriented. Went to Starbucks and talked for a couple hours, it was nice. So, I set up another date. We went for ice cream, and again talked for a while. We were sitting outside, and I mentioned something about how guys have obvious body parts to be attracted to on women, while girls pick out odd things like calves and such. He gets real weird and says, I don't know if I should tell you this, so of course I prod him until he tells me. So first he says he's got a foot fetish. That's not super strange, and I'm mostly curious, so I ask him tons of questions about it. He'd never been in a serious relationship, so I ask him if he could handle being with a girl who wasn't into it, at least long enough to feel love towards him, and he said no. I've called a girl from back pages a couple times cause I couldn't take it anymore. Still not that weird. Then he asks if I have ever heard of a crush fetish. He tells me not to Google it, because it'll freak me out. Still haven't, never will. There are 2 levels of a crush fetish. LVL1, becoming aroused watching someone crush invertebrate animals under their feet, like bugs, which was his fetish. And LVL2, watching someone crush vertebrate animals like bunnies or kittens. This got me thinking about our previous date. We had a conversation on the first date about how I had been getting a lot more bugs in my room that summer, and so I'd been like squishing bugs all fucking day. And he said that really got him going. I also realized he had asked me what kind of shoes I typically wear, and I had just brushed it off and answered him. I was wearing moccasins and, being a pretty open person, told him how they make my feet smelly, so I try to avoid them. He told me that, I got really turned on when you said that. I'd love to smell your shoes if you'd let me. Among other very forward, very specific and unwelcome statements about what turned him on about me. Best part, I told him a week or so later I'd met someone, and that we should end our communications. He texted me a few months later 4 or 5 times asking me for my help, and that he'd pay me to let him do stuff with my feet. I used to be able to smell a scam from a mile away, but I have been left embarrassed and ashamed in falling for something that was clearly dodgy, and sadly I was blinded by my own greed. Matched with a girl from Tinder, cute Chinese girl near me called, and red flag 1. We spoke for a week, then moved to WhatsApp, where she was using a Hong Kong phone number, red flag 2. I questioned the number, and she said she had just traveled back to Shanghai, but is a student in my area, and was returning in a month, red flag 3. At this point I was certain she was fake, but over the next week she would speak about her day as normal, would send pictures/videos of her going out to places, and would send voice messages, as if we were close, which slowly gained my trust. I tried to reverse image search everything, but I couldn't find any results. Around week 3 she casually brought up cryptocurrency. Now I was already very invested in crypto for a while, and she had an incredible amount of knowledge on the subject. She mentioned that she sold all her Bitcoin, which was roughly 1 million USDT worth, and had invested in an ICO for a cryptocurrency called PBM. I tried to search for PBM everywhere, but it didn't exist. I questioned her about it, and she said that this was an exclusive ICO, which was going to be China's only cryptocurrency, which is currently only being shared among the big Chinese companies such as Alibaba, Tencent, UnionPay, Jingdong, etc. She only had access to it because her uncle works for Alibaba, and also sent me a Forbes article which confirmed all of this. She says she can give me access to it if I click on the link she sent me with an invitation code to be given access to the platform. The platform was called BFF.cash, dodgy name red flag 4. I look online and can't find it anywhere other than this link, but I register anyway, and it looks like a lot of work has gone in it to make it look as real as possible. The brand of the platform was called EQ Exchange, and it gave you wallet which allowed you to invest in the major cryptocurrencies such as BTC and ETH with accurate price index. This is major red flag 5. You could only deposit by withdrawing crypto from another crypto wallet, which was in my case Binance, and send a screenshot of the successful withdrawal. I didn't know how to do this, and to no surprise to me now, she was able to give exact instructions on how to do it. I only deposited 1,000 USDT to start with, and I would try to withdraw back to Binance just to test it, and it was transferred back into my Binance wallet within 20 minutes. This gained my trust in the platform and put the money into the ICO, and it would get me about 300 PBM as the value was around 3 USD. The next couple of days she was boasting how she had bought 1 million PBM when it first launched a month earlier at a price of 0.002 USDT, and how I should buy more because the value is increasing quickly before the ICO ends on the May 24th, 2021. Over the next week I got carried away and ended up investing 50,000 USDT. Dumb I know. We kept talking for another week and talking about how rich we were going to be, but then she started becoming more aggressive about investing more, and I should max out credit cards, get a bank loan, and use my family's money, which finally smacked me out of her spell, and realized that I can't actually withdraw my money from this ICO. I panic and search everywhere about possible scams with these details, but I couldn't find anything for ages until I came across a translated Bulgarian article that matches everything. I'm devastated. I don't question her straight away. Instead, I tried to scam her back by convincing her to transfer 50,000 USDT to my BFF.cash wallet, refused to do it on Binance, and then take it for myself, but they quickly realized and froze my account. I played dumb to her about it for a while, but she eventually blocked me, and now I'm here. I know I will get, if you're dumb enough to fall for it, then you deserve to lose your money. Which is true, but I really needed to get this out there for anyone about to go through the same situation. For starters, this happened about a week ago. Lockdown has been very boring for many, so I, 18 male, in my ultimate world of wisdom, decided to give the good ol' Tinder a try. It was an average morning, and I got a match with, let's call her Sandra. By about 2 p.m. we had been talking back and forth before she ultimately asks for my Snapchat, to which I albeit stupidly complied. Time passes by, and I'm going on with my day when it comes to be time to walk the doggo. I tell her I'm going on a walk and that I will message later. Anyways, about half an hour into my walk I receive a red snap. For those not familiar with Snapchat, this is a picture message. To my absolute surprise and horror, it's a picture of the front of my street. I replied to what I was only hoping is a freak coincidence. After all, Sandra claimed she had lived about 45 minutes away from my house, which I had never disclosed the location of. I asked what she was doing, and she said she wanted to come to get to know me in person, and explained that she'd looked at my Snapchat maps and decided to drive down. Stupidly willing to give a girl with a bit of commitment a chance, I decided to tell her to come meet me on my dog walk as a little get-to-know-each-other stroll. However, as a car pulls into the car park, I think nothing of it until the car pulls up to me and announces herself as Sandra, looking not even a tiny bit like her photos. I'm not a person to judge, as even I can understand that you can edit photos to your advantage, etc. However, she did not look the tiniest bit like her photos and was very overweight, which I again have no problem with. However, I'm just not attracted to overweight people whatsoever. Next red flag was her refusal to get out of the car, which came as a surprise, as she's been so keen to come see me. I can understand it, though, as it's going meeting someone new, than going on a countryside walk. Anyways, I come to the conclusion that I should walk home and tell her to stay there so that I can meet her again, and so that she didn't know my house number for the exact reason that occurred. I walk off towards my house, and as I go around the corner, I look behind me to see her slowly following behind. I proceed to do the only thing my head tells me to do, and book it down the path, and make it to my house with her car out of sight. I sit in my room, and not knowing what else to do, I turn off my location, and prepare a message to apologize for not being able to make it out. That's when the doorbell goes, and I jump to my feet to see her car in my driveway. I practically flew down the stairs, only to find her talking to my mum, explaining how I'd invited her over for tea. I didn't. Obviously, my mum, being the kind-hearted person she is, happily invites her in, as our tea was already prepared. What proceeded was the most awkward, horrendous, and every other bad word of a meal I have ever endured. Topped off when she admitted to lying about her age on her Tinder profile, and proclaimed she was 27 as opposed to the 18 on her profile. This might not seem so bad, but for someone who's recently turned 18, 27 is a huge jump, and not something I would have agreed to. My mum was horrified and ended up making an excuse that we had to go to some family event. No honorary, this happened a few weeks ago. I am sitting in a cafe parking lot trying to figure out what the F just happened last night. Background information. I downloaded Tinder to give men another go. Maybe if I adjust my age range and find someone a little older than me, I'll find someone who's better than average to mattress mambo with. Here's where Kyle comes into play. We've been talking for a week. East Coast transplant, country-ish, truck driving, tattooed, physically fit, well-groomed, busy with his career, doing his own thing sort of dude. The second half of his descriptors are my type. I know, but your girl is desperate. He's also a veteran. We get along over text, fun, friendly banter. We FaceTime a few times and generally seem to, for a lack of a better word, vibe. Further into the week, our conversation gets really flirty. We seem to have similar interests, and the mention of a safe word comes up. Green flag. I'm okay with that. We both live a little outside of a big city, so we got a hotel and met up in the city. I am more familiar with the city than Kyle is. I've parked, and I go meet him, and we find a place for him to leave his truck. After we park, he asked me to get his gun from the glove box while he's making sure everything is in his bag. I live in a state where concealed carry/owning a gun is pretty normal, and he comes from one similar. This wasn't weird to me, but feels relevant to the story. I jokingly said, "I don't want my fingerprints on your gun," as I handed him his gun, only touching the sleeve it was in. I hope he jokingly said, "This one is not my burner gun." Yikes number one. On our way to the bar, the sidewalk is packed, and we are trying to get indoors. Kyle touched the back of this guy and said, "Hey, excuse me." As I walked by the man that Kyle touched, the man says, "Don't f-ing touch me ever again." Kyle turns around and yells, "Well then don't stand in the fucking way." Yikes. We get food and 2 beers, and this is when I realize Kyle is a little more toxic gender roles and conservative than I realized. Not a big deal. I love Red Dead Redemption. This man can still make a comeback. We head home after getting drinks and dinner. We turn on the TV, we're sitting on the couch, and pretty much lots of heavy petting turns into kissing turns into making babies. This man and I go for rounds. Imagine a ping pong game, and no body is finishing, but we just keep tying the game. Someone's gotta win by 2. Deuce. The sex is good. No safe word has been dropped. It's just casual good 2 horny people sex. I think we started at 11:30 p.m., and the third round ended at like 1:20 a.m. After the water break, round 4 starts up, and everything is going fine. I'm going to try and be as detailed as possible without giving too much information out there. This man is standing up. I am laying on my back on the couch going down on him. He's clearly enjoying it. I can hear and physically tell. I kid you not. I don't know how to say this. I don't know how to type these words out. But he peed in my mouth. I literally got up and spit the shit out everywhere and asked him what the fuck. He laughed. He laughed. Kyle says something to the effect of, "I like doing things that catch people off guard." Clearly Kyle. After that, night is ruined. I go shower alone, and it's obvious that I'm like not into him. I go to bed. This man snores like a FING chainsaw. Now you're asking, why don't you get the fuck up and run away in that moment? The accumulation of red flags made it feel safer to stay and get the hell out later. Next morning, I pack my shit up and say goodbye, and he asks if we're gonna hang out again. Oh my god. Now I'm drinking coffee, and I'm about to go pick up my little brother from school.